My name is Mark Vicente. I'm a director, producer, writer, and troublemaker. I'm not totally certain if the trouble finds me or I find it. I'm most known as the director of the film What the Bleep Do We Know, and as one of the NXIVM whistleblowers featured in the HBO series The Vow. Let's just say I know a thing or two about cults. I don't consider myself a cult expert, but I'm definitely an expert in being screwed over, waking up, and knowing how to spot them. And let me tell you, they're everywhere. As you'll hear, I have a pretty salty approach to most things, and I'm utterly fascinated by the patterns in human behavior that create the best and the worst in society. I'm part geek, part rebel, and pissed off about a whole bunch of things. Join me as I unpack a whole range of topics to do with psychology, spirituality, consciousness, morality, cults, narcissistic abuse, science, filmmaking, and philosophy. You never quite know what you're going to get, as it really does depend on what the fuck is on my mind. Hello! So, a lot of my friends and acquaintances have been telling me to start a podcast or asking me when I'm starting a podcast. So I guess this is it. This is me starting a podcast. And there's been a number of reasons I think that I've been procrastinating. I've had some resistance. I think one of the reasons is this sort of thought of like, well, who the hell am I to start a podcast? I'm not sure I have things of value to say. On the other hand, I am extremely opinionated about a great many things, so there's that. I think another reason has been, when you've been in a cult, being disciplined for so many years with, strict regimens and strict schedules, you kind of abandon all of that once you break out of that mindset. And I think the idea of doing a podcast and, showing up every week or every whatever the time period is just felt like, I can't do it. But I think probably the real reason is insecurity. Insecurity has been my lifelong companion, as I'm sure some of you can relate. But I do think there's a lot of important things to talk about. And I think that because of everything I've gone through in my life, I think I do have a unique perspective. It's not necessarily better or right, but it is a unique perspective on the world, I think, because I see a lot of behaviors in the world at the moment that are extremely troubling. And I want to address not necessarily the specifics, like specific people or specific groups all the time, but the patterns that I'm seeing, the process of what's going on. Right now in our society, I see tremendous coercion, a lot of us and them thinking, a lot of black and white thinking. I'm also seeing a tremendous amount of triangulation. I'm seeing the wool being pulled over people's eyes in different ways. I'm seeing not only grandiose narcissism, but covert narcissism, which is a huge topic of importance. And a lot of the things I'm seeing in the world right now are basically textbook cult tactics. And I think they have to be spoken about. And somebody said to me recently, well, perhaps because of your experience, everything's colored and you see everything as a cult. No, I don't. But I do think that it's helped me see the pattern of those tactics more clearly because of what I've gone through. By the way, every now and again, you might hear seagulls in the background. I am recording this in Portugal. You will hear seagulls. You will hear roosters crowing. You will hear parties happening in the background. Portugal is a very, very lively place. I have a whole list of things I want to talk about, in the next coming episodes. One of the things is my obsession with narcissism and understanding narcissism, studying narcissism. And I think that came out of the realization of what I was involved in and who Raniere actually was. And that launched me on this obsessive desire to understand. And I'm currently making a film about that, not Raniere, about narcissism. I will probably touch on the abuse of our yearnings, if we have this need, I think many of us, to fill this sort of God-sized hole, as somebody once put it, and that need to fill that gets abused by a great many people. I'm also going to talk, because of the Vow Part 2 coming out, I'm going to release certain things that have never come out and discuss them on the podcast. I think that'll be pretty interesting. One of my episodes is going to be entitled Why I Was Wrong About Keith Raniere, but it's not what you think. That should be interesting. Another topic I want to talk about is the refusal of some people to acknowledge evil, and how that refusal allows it to continue and makes it sort of invisible, so it can continue unabated, and people that behave very badly get shielded by this unwillingness to acknowledge what's going on. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I reached out to people on social media and said, if I was to do a podcast, what should I talk about? And I did get some interesting messages, a lot of them from my friends. One of my friends said filmmaking. In fact, many people said filmmaking. Another friend said, I would be interested to know about your what the bleep journey as a filmmaker, and if the concepts that it puts forward are still relevant for you today. I should talk about that, shouldn't I? Another friend said human nature, conscience, cognitive dissonance, cults, filmmaking, that's just the start. I agree, that's all good stuff. Another good friend said I should talk about cancel culture, the nature of real reasons to examine behavior. Cancel culture, that's a tricky one. Another friend said chocolate chip cookies and how they are both mystical and scientifically connected to altered states of consciousness. Yeah, that's all important stuff. That is important stuff. Someone else said, you have a great way of articulating your perspective on so many things. Thank you. I would love to hear how you're continuing your journey, and would be cool to hear about whatever you might be working on and researching for your films and other projects. Yeah, I am going to talk a bit about that. Somebody else said, I'd like to know what drives you, especially after you got out of a cult. How do you go about educating yourself and others while also keeping in mind what formulas were used to brainwash you and that keep you from doing the same to others? Yeah, that is important. Here's a nice one. Anything, you have a fantastic voice. Why, thank you. Another person on social media said, aside from the obvious, what you already talk about regarding cult recovery and everything you've learned, I'd like a podcast that has an unconventional structure of 1 week is about general umbrella topic, and the next week is a free week where you talk to whoever you want, but the subject is something unrelated, like the arts. Just a thought. That's exactly what I was thinking. Someone else said, I realize I might end up in the minority here, but I'd like to know more about you from you. Yes, indeed. Perhaps some filmmaking techniques, some filmmaking choices. Those can be looked at through a prism of the cult as well. Frankly, I'm interested in who you are. Why, thank you. I will talk about filmmaking and films. I don't think I'm going to share much about the technical aspects of making films, but I definitely do want to talk about the morality and ethics of filmmaking or media in general. And one of the things I was thinking about actually recently is, this God-sized hole I was mentioning. I want to do a whole episode on this, but I was thinking about most advertisers are aware that people have this God-sized hole. And the question is, what do you do with that hole? Do you exploit it and convince the person that the only thing they can do to make that better is to buy a product? Or do you try to lead them back to their own true self, which might help in some way? So I do want to talk about that at length. I'll do a whole episode on that. Somebody else said, you should do an episode of how you keep your beard and hair looking so good and tidy. Seriously, what is your secret? My secret is never recording myself when I look like shit. That's my only secret. Another message was, well, I got to say, all the experiences you've had, I'd love to know your thoughts on why so many actors/artists fall into these coercive traps. Is it the nature of the business that because of its lack of stability, these programs offer security in self? I don't know that I know the answer to that, but we can certainly discuss it. another suggestion for a topic is, we always know how a movie was made, but we never get to see how a documentary is made. Yeah, a documentary is utter chaos. Let me tell you, it is chaos. I actually prefer making narrative films because of the level of control you have. Because with a documentary, you have a theory, you start, and the first casualty is the plan. Everything goes to shit. It's complete chaos. And then somewhere in the middle of everything, you start to formulate a story with everything you're capturing. But it is chaos. It's wonderful in some ways, but my God, I do miss the control of just narrative features. Another topic someone suggested is narcissistic everything, and how are you dealing with the aftermath? Can you let it go? Does it do loops in your brain? Some tactics to overcome the constant struggle to get out from under the hold it had on you. That is interesting. It's funny. I mentioned this on another podcast recently. I still do have dreams about some of the people on the inside. And a lot of the dreams, there's two kinds of dreams. The one kind of dream is I'm back inside the cult. I'm with everybody. I don't understand why the fuck they're still there. And I'm trying to convince them that shit's bad and they need to get out. And they just look at me like they're puzzled. That's the one kind of dream. And the other kind of dream is to do with the grief of the many, many people that no longer wish to talk to me or relate to me at all because they feel that I and my compatriots destroyed Eden. And I do have a lot of grief. I miss those people tremendously. So those are the two kinds of dreams I have. But I will go into more detail about all of that. So I'm rambling, but basically those are just a few of the topics that I think I'm going to be covering. I don't know how often I will put episodes out. I think that the next few weeks leading up to The Vow Part 2, I'll put out a fair amount of content, and it also depends on my shooting schedule because I'm shooting a number of projects right now, so it depends when I have time. But I'm always kind of pissed off about something, so I definitely will find time at some point to record more episodes. I just cannot promise how often. It certainly will not be a regular schedule. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for joining and maybe subscribing if you want to. There are many, many cool things I think we're going to discuss. And yes, in the future, at some point, I will also be having guests. We will talk soon.